Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Charuttamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriya Ashtaprayeshu Avadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Bhagavati Naistiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Sasrup Das Goswami, Volume 4, in every town and village around the world 1968 to 1971, Chapter 30th, London, A Dream Fulfilled. So Prabhupada was going to move from Tittenhurst estate of John Lennon to the temple at Berry Street, or Berry Place. So he moved, and the day he moved, the next day severe storm swept through the Tittenhurst estate, breaking windows and uprooting trees. November 3rd, 1969, Prabhupada moved into his furnished apartment on Baker Street, a 10-minute drive from the Berry Place temple. After 2 months in London, he was anxious to see his temple open, and Shyamsundar was working hard, although progressing slowly. From the temple's interior, Shyamsundar had an artistic concept taken from photographs he had seen of the Ajanta caves, South Indian temples with walls and ceilings of carved stone. His inspiration was to produce a similar effect using California redwood. He and Mukunda had shipped to England a year ago. on first hearing his plans, Prabhupada had asked, why make it so artistic? But Shyamsundar had been so set on the idea that Prabhupada had permitted him. With the ceiling partly finished, there was no turning back. Shyamsundar toiled day and night, yet each day the temple design seemed to grow more elaborate, with the walls and floor fashioned of solid redwood and the ceiling lined with redwood arches. Shyamsundar took great care to see that each piece fit exactly into place. As Shyamsundar inched along, devotees joked that the room looked like an upside-down boat. But Prabhupada encouraged him, telling him it was very beautiful. Prabhupada often allowed his disciples to work as they liked. He reasoned that they were raising the money and could spend it in Krishna's service as they pleased. He also did not care to interfere in every detail of a disciple's service, especially when that disciple was strong-headed and had ideas that were not harmful or obstructive. All Prabhupada's disciples were ultimately under his absolute decision, but he was often lenient, 80% lenient, he would sometimes say. So this is another sign of great leadership, that he gave to a certain extent free hand for the creative ideas. Of course, devotees were doing their best for Krishna's service. And Prabhupada didn't want to get into each and every aspect. Give them some creativity, some freedom, so they can do the best service. Shyamsundar particularly thrived on having his own big projects. He had arranged for the Mantra Rock Dance at San Francisco, built the first Rath Yatra carts, established a friendship with George Harrison, and now he was designing a temple. Prabhupada allowed it watchfully, like a father. Consulting the Vedic calendar, Prabhupada chose December 14th for temple opening celebration. And despite predictions from Shyamsundar and the others that the deadline would be impossible to meet, Prabhupada ordered invitations printed immediately. The devotees had tremendous work to do and little time. Not only did they have the temple to complete, but also Prabhupada's quarters on the second floor and the kitchen in the basement. Faced with their tight deadline, they worked harder. As Prabhupada was anxious about the temple opening, he was also anxious about publishing the first volume of Krishna, but he had no money. According to printers' estimates, the book would cost about $19,000. Prabhupada told Shyamsundar to ask his friend George for a donation. Shyamsundar, who had always been careful not to ask George for money, was hesitant. But Prabhupada insisted, and Shyamsundar gave in. George agreed, but regretted it afterward. Then Shyamsundar began to feel sorry. After all, he hadn't really wanted to ask George, and George hadn't really wanted to be asked. But when Prabhupada heard of this, he invited George to see him. George told Prabhupada that every day people were asking him for his money. But when Prabhupada explained the importance of the Krishna book, and how George's donation would be devotional service to Krishna. George dismissed his regrets. He also agreed to write a foreword to the volume. George: I didn't really think I was qualified to write the foreword to Prabhupada's book, but one way of looking at it is, because I'm known, it would help. But from the other point of view, it could really hinder, because not everyone wants to listen or to believe what I say. There are a lot of people who would be put off just because I'm saying it. I mean, if I picked up a book on Krishna and the foreword was written by Frank Zappa or somebody like that, I would think, God, maybe I don't want to know about it. So I thought that although he asked me, maybe Prabhupada didn't really want me to write the foreword, but it was one of those things I couldn't get out. Everybody had their minds made up. You're writing the foreword, and that's it. So I just did it. When Prabhupada asked to watch the moon landing, the devotees rented a television and placed it in Prabhupada's living room. Prabhupada took his massage as usual, sitting in a chair before the television. Purushottam announced, well, Prabhupada, it's about time, so we'll turn on the television, and soon we will be getting some pictures from the astronauts out in the space. A reporter was speaking from Cape Canaveral, Florida. We are just about to get the first pictures of this historic occasion. The picture appeared fuzzy, then clear. The spacecraft had landed on the moon. As the astronauts emerged from the ship, they slowly eased themselves down onto the moon's surface. Purushottam was in ecstasy. Dhananjay: I was attempting to massage Prabhupada's head and at the same time watch the program. All of a sudden, as the men were landing, Prabhupada motioned for me to sit in front of him. So I came forward. As soon as I sat down, Prabhupada started to massage my head. I was quite embarrassed. You have forgotten how to massage properly, he asked. This is how you do it. He massaged my head for about 2 minutes. Then I stood behind Prabhupada and again began massaging his head. By this time, the astronauts were moving across the landscape. They had gotten out the little American flag and were sticking it in the ground and were jumping up and down. Apparently, they were defying gravity because every time they jumped up, they would float through the air and then gently land again. There was a lot of jubilation and songs from them. So Purushottam, Prabhupada asked, they have come to the moon. Yes, Prabhupada, Purushottam said excitedly. They have landed on the moon. Prabhupada smiled. Dhananjay: again, Prabhupada motioned me to the front. I moved around and sat down. I thought he wanted me to massage him from the front, but again he put his hands on my head and massaged. He said, can't you learn this simple thing, massaging my head? I had been watching the television, not giving my full attention to my service. I tried again, but again Prabhupada said, you still don't know how to do this. I said, well, Prabhupada, I'm trying my hardest. He laughed and said, that's all right, continue. Prabhupada asked Purushottam, so what can you see? We are exploring the moon's surface, he said. So what's there? Well, it looks like they have landed inside a crater somewhere and the ground is sandy with some rocks. Well, look, they're showing some shadows from some of the rocks that are lying around. That's all you can see. There are no people, there are no trees, there are no rivers, there are no buildings. No, Purushottam replied, the moon is barren. They have not landed on the moon. Prabhupada said emphatically, this is not the moon. Later, when Malti brought in Prabhupada's lunch, he said, what Malti has done, she has made this little khichdi for Krishna. And that is far greater than what they have done. Even the Prabhupada's quarters were incomplete and temple renovation made 7 very place noisy and hectic. Prabhupada decided to move in. I'm not attached to a comfortable apartment, he said. My attachment is to live in the association of devotees. He was moving into the temple at a time when the record sales were low and the devotees were having to purchase supplies piecemeal whenever they got money. Yet with Prabhupada living with them and supervising their work, they were satisfied. Tamal Krishna arrived from Los Angeles, and in addition to supervising much of the construction, he began taking the devotees out daily to chant on the streets and sell back-to-garden magazines. Yamuna was sewing curtains from morning until night. Ishan, Shyamsundar, and others were working every possible hour on the renovation. And every day, Prabhupada would walk through the building to see the progress. With only 1 week left until the opening, Shyamsundar still labored on the temple ceiling. He had not even begun the altar. Again, the other devotees complained to Prabhupada that Shyamsundar was too slow. But Prabhupada replied, he wants to make it artistic. Let him do it. Shyamsundar, this time on his own, asked George for a donation for an altar. George gave 2,000 pounds, and Shyamsundar picked out a slab of golden sienna marble and 2 slabs of red marble. Although Prabhupada had a pair of 17-inch carved wood deities of Radha and Krishna, he didn't plan to use them. And the size of the altar Shyamsundar was building clearly required larger deities. So this is again now a very wonderful story of how Prabhupada got these Radha Krishna deities. One day a Mr. Doyal phoned, representing a large London Hindu society. He had heard the devotees wanted Radha Krishna deities, and he had a pair he would donate. When Prabhupada heard the news, he sent Tamal Krishna, Mukunda and Shyamsundar to Mr. Doyal's house to see the deity. Radha Krishna were white marble and stood about 3 feet high. Never before had the devotees seen such large deities, and they offered obeisances. When they returned to the temple and told Prabhupada, he said, take me there at once. Srila Prabhupada, accompanied by Shyamsundar, Mukunda and Tamal Krishna, arrived by van at Mr. Doyal's home. Prabhupada entered the living room and sat down. The deities, covered by a cloth, stood on a table in the corner. Tamal Krishna was about to unveil them when Prabhupada checked him. No, that's all right. Prabhupada sat and spoke with Mr. Doyal, asking him about his work and where he had come from in India. And he met Mr. Doyal's family. Prabhupada and his host chatted while the devotees listened. Swamiji, Mr. Doyal said at length, I want to show you my deities. Yes, Prabhupada replied, I'll see them after some time. Prabhupada began to speak about his Krishna consciousness mission, and after a while, Mr. Doyal again requested, please take a look at these deities. And with that, he walked over and unveiled Radha and Krishna. Oh yes, Prabhupada said, folding his hands respectfully. Mr. Doyal explained that he had ordered the deities from India for his own use, but in transit, a tiny piece of Radharani's finger had chipped off. And therefore, according to Hindu tradition, the deities could not be installed. Tamal Krishna, Prabhupada said, see how heavy these deities are. Tamal Krishna, placing one hand on Radharani's face and the other around her shoulder, lifted her. Not so heavy, he said. Shyamsundar, Prabhupada said, see how heavy is Krishna. The deities were actually heavy for one man to carry, but the devotees understood Prabhupada's intention. Not bad, Shyamsundar said, holding Krishna a few inches off the table. Yes, Prabhupada said conclusively, I think they're all right. Let's take them. We have our van. And suddenly Prabhupada was leaving with his disciples following, carefully carrying Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada thanked Mr. Doyal. But Swamiji, protested Mr. Doyal, who was not prepared for this sudden exit. Please, we'll arrange to bring them. Our society will bring them. But Prabhupada was already out the door and leading his men to the van. Please wait, Mr. Doyal persisted. We have to fix them first, then you can take them. Oh, we have expert man, Prabhupada said. He can fix these things. Prabhupada was assuring Mr. Doyal and at the same time directing his disciples. He opened the door of the van and Shyamsundar and Tamal Krishna slowly entered, cautiously setting Radha and Krishna within. Tamal Krishna knelt in the back to hold the deities secure, and while Shyamsundar got into the driver's seat. Now drive, Prabhupada said, and off they went, with Prabhupada smiling from the window to Mr. Doyal and his family who stood together on the curb. Prabhupada had driven but a few blocks when Prabhupada asked him to, Shyamsundar had driven but a few blocks when Prabhupada asked him to stop the van. Turning around in his seat, Prabhupada began offering prayers. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajam. He looked long at Krishna, who was white, with a slight bluish cast and an exquisite white Radharani by his side. Krishna is so kind, he said. He has come like this. Then he had Shyamsundar continue driving slowly back to the temple. Carefully, Prabhupada supervised his disciples carrying the deities up to the second floor. The devotees were astounded and delighted to see Prabhupada in such an animated and intense state, bringing Radha and Krishna into their temple. He had the deities placed in a curtained-off section of his own room, and then he sat at his desk. Prabhupada smiled. Krishna has played a great trick. In the Mahabharata also, he said, there are incidents where Krishna plays tricks. One such trick was Krishna's agreeing to be on the side of the general he saw first in the morning. The two opposing generals, Arjun and Duryodhan, had both come to Krishna's tent early in the morning as Krishna slept. They had agreed that one of them would stand at Krishna's head and the other at Krishna's feet, and they would wait until Krishna awoke. Duryodhan chose to stand by Krishna's head, while Arjun chose his feet. Krishna awoke and saw Arjun. That was one great trick that was played by Krishna, Prabhupada said. Similarly, this is a great trick. He told how Krishna had also tricked Mother Yashoda when she had tried to discipline Krishna. He had run away and she had run after him, caught him and tried to tie him with the ropes. But every time she came with more rope, Prabhupada said it was just a little too short. Krishna couldn't play any kind of trick. Another such trick has been played. They made so much effort to bring these deities here, thinking they'll be for the Hindu center. But all the time, Krishna wanted to come here. So this chip on the deity's hand is just Krishna's trick, and we have caught them. Mukunda said, you kidnapped Krishna. Yes, Prabhupada said. Once I was in the bank and the manager had some scheme, but I foiled his scheme. So he said to me, Mr. Day, you should have been a politician. Prabhupada laughed. Then he became grave and asked the devotees not to talk about the incident. Many people would not understand how he could install a chipped deity. The devotees agreed to keep the secret, but they had no doubt that Prabhupada's love for Krishna was transcendental to Hindu customs. Radha and Krishna had come to the London on Prabhupada's desire. So also Prabhupada later said about this incident that this Mr. Doyal actually wanted money for the deities because he had spent so much money to bring the deities to London and keep them there. But the way Prabhupada acted, he was just surprised. And all of a sudden, Radha and Krishna were gone from their house and he didn't get any money. So, but at the same time, we have to be careful. We cannot imitate Prabhupada. Prabhupada could do these things. We cannot do that. And if we start doing these things, whether in the name of the society is gone or personally, it just brings bad reputation. So we have to be very careful. Prabhupada could do. Prabhupada is pure devotee of Krishna. And Krishna can play his games with Prabhupada, but not us. Not us. And also this chipped deity for Radharani's, I don't know, hand or one of the fingers were chipped. Technically, we should not install it, but Prabhupada could do that. So we got to be careful. That's all. How do you dress big deities like this? Yamuna asked. They already have clothes on. Prabhupada said, you bring me some cloth. What kind of cloth, Prabhupada? What should the clothes look like? Look like in the picture, he replied. Well, there's so many different pictures, she said. Sometimes Krishna has a ruffled skirt on, sometimes he had dhoti on, sometimes he has a big crown on. Krishna looks very beautiful in saffron. Prabhupada said, so you bring me some silk dhotis in yellow and saffron color. Yamuna collected 6 silk saris with silver and gold borders, and Prabhupada indicated the design he wanted and told Yamuna how to arrange the crowns. With only a few days remaining before the installation ceremony, Yamuna began working almost continuously at her sewing machine. Several times a day, Prabhupada would come to see her progress. Shyamsundar had completed most of the altar, except for Lord Jagannath's altar and the canopy over Radha and Krishna's throne. Both the canopy and Lord Jagannath's altar would be supported by 4 heavy wooden columns, more than 6 feet high. 2 rear columns would hold a marble slab for Lord Jagannath's deity to stand on, and 2 front columns were now supporting Radha and Krishna's large velvet canopy. The columns were big and heavy. Shyamsundar called them elephant-legged columns. The columns now stood in place on the altar, although Shyamsundar hadn't had a chance to secure them. The day before the installation, Shyamsundar collapsed upstairs in exhaustion. He worked so hard for such a long time. He was exhausted, and obviously not much of nourishment he would get because the food was scarce, prasadam was scarce. So he collapsed. So then I don't want to read the installation ceremony because it has some more incidents. We'll just read it tomorrow. Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, can we see this picture? You install kiya tha unhone pura temple.
I have to see if I can go to those pictures. Installation ceremony ki na?
Installation की भी और otherwise also जब हो गया तो फिर वो that how
हाँ हाँ आजकल की पिक्चर तो मिल जाएगी पर इंस्टॉलेशन टाइम की आई डोंट नो आई हैव टू सी
okay if you get to please post.
Sure, Mata.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji.
Thank you,
Hare Krishna,
Prabhuji. Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna. Jai
Jai
Srila
Srila.
Prabhu.